Hello, welcome back to Bound and Unraveled. My name is Christina, and for this week's video, I want to completely subvert the typical format for one of these videos. Usually, I try and be organized and structure these around a genre or pick books thematically. Instead, this week intentionally we're going to flip that on its head and do a bit of mood reading. This really follows off of last week's video in which I talked about how for me, mood reading is an integral part of being able to have a consistent and sustainable reading habit. For me, that means one of two things. Either reading based on context. So for example, I have a list on my phone where each time I hear a book that I want to read one day, I organize it based on the season of the year. So I have books I want to read in autumn, winter, spring, and summer. And I find that really fun. And it helps me embrace the season that I'm in as well. But an alternative to that, option two, is to just read whatever speaks to me in that moment. When I think back to what I was like as a kid and how I first fell in love with reading, I am remembering going to the library with my mom and my sister, and my mom would let us max out all of our cards, and we would leave the library with bags of books. And I remember on the car ride home, it was a 5-minute drive, and I would just start picking out the books and reading the first page, one after the other, to see which one I felt like reading first, and just immediately dive in. Now that I'm older, I realized I've fallen so much more into the habit of trying to be really intentional and considerate about my reading, which is great, but sometimes it can be nice to ditch the structure for a second and be a little bit chaotic. So with that in mind, I went to the library and I did something I haven't done in a while. I just picked books off of the shelves based on pretty covers and fun blurbs, or books that I've seen recommended that I don't know for sure I would like enough to buy. And obviously, the library is a huge luxury, and it is so fun to be able to bring stacks of books home without the pressure to read all of them and feel like I wasted money or not like them. The goal for this video is not to read all of these books because that's kind of the opposite of the energy I'm trying to bring into this new year. Instead, the idea is to let go of the pressure and just read whatever I feel like reading. I'm also trying to wean myself off of being so online all the time. So I'm also hoping that this way, if something is really fun for me on a TV show or on YouTube videos or other media that I'm consuming, that I can find something in my stack of books that will suit that energy. So I've got a couple of historical fiction, a thriller, some literary fiction, some fantasy, a murder mystery, and a rom-com. So hopefully something to suit each mood. The first book that we're going to start with is Babylonia by Costanza Casati, and it's a historical fiction book set in ancient Mesopotamia during the 9th century BC, and we follow a main protagonist called Semiramis, who is an orphan. Never heard of this book, but the reason I checked this out is this part of the blurb which says, Semiramis will bow to no man, for who will stand in her way? A husband? A lover? In this world, kings fall while queens rise. And I was in the mood for something about a really strong kick-ass woman just really making her way in the world. So I actually cheated. I started this morning. Yeah, I don't really know where this video will take us to next. I hope you don't mind that we're going to be a little bit more chaotic than usual. And just gonna take things one book at a time and see what's fun. I will check back in with you soon and we'll decide then what our next step will be. I hope that this can also be an invitation to think back to and reconnect with whatever your childhood reader looked like. I already described how I've kind of gone through the process of becoming a more structured reader, but I did start out as like a library kid just picking books out randomly. That's how I discovered so many different genres that I love. That freedom was really important for me for becoming a reader. So this is an invitation as well to think about what you were like when you first started reading and think about ways that you may be able to give yourself the liberty to incorporate a little bit of that energy wherever you are now. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Saw you paint a picture of a face, a face that wasn't even close to mine. shouldn't be in love, but it's so hard to move on. You haven't changed, you stayed the same. But if you did, I'd still love you anyway. I'd give you the world like I promised I would, even though you wouldn't do the same. I'd give you the world like I promised I would, even though you wouldn't do the same. Had this conversation more than 10 times.
Hello! It has been a couple days and I just finished Babylonia. Overall, this was really interesting. I'm glad to have read it. I am surprised that I hadn't really read anything set in this time and place before, and so it was really cool to learn about the mythology, learn about like the writing systems, and also learn about how different kingdoms and empires butted up against one another at that time. It was kind of surprisingly bloody. I wasn't expecting so many battle scenes, and obviously whenever there is the expansion of an empire, that's brutal and often cruel. It was also a little bit shocking because the relationship dynamics at the heart of this book are frankly twisted and a bit messed up. And if you pick up this book, will know what I'm talking about within like the first 50 pages. But I'm going to try to avoid spoilers and just say that there's a love triangle where 2 points of the triangle should not be connecting. It should have stayed up like a pyramid, and instead it really is a true triangle. So yeah, that was weird. Finally, I was expecting to read a little bit more about like a queen at the height of her powers, and instead this is more like the origin story / the rise to power. So I don't know that I would recommend buying this book, but if you're in the mood for like very ancient history based or mythological retellings with a feminist tilt, I think this would scratch that itch. So perhaps worth checking out at your library. And it was well written, and again, I really couldn't put it down, or didn't want to put it down, except for in the final section where I felt like it was lagging a little bit and it was kind of ready for the story to wrap up. Apart from that, pretty solid read, just pretty messed up. For the next book, I am feeling in an artsy headspace because I went to the Tate late at the Tate Modern last night with a friend, and today we went to the Natural History Museum and then the Victoria and Albert, the V&A. And whenever I'm around museums for a while, it always inspires me and gives me a lot of like that feeling of wonder, and I'm in the headspace after being in museums all day where I'm kind of ready for a book that will make it feel like my brain's stretching a little bit. I actually want to pick up next If on a Winter's Night a Traveler by Italo Calvino. I tried to start this book in 2021 and just wasn't in the right mood for it, but I think right now this might be the time. If you don't know, this is supposed to be kind of a meta-level book that is quite inventive in its form, where literally when you begin the book, the first words are, you are about to begin reading Italo Calvino's new novel, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. And it takes you in, like telling you, and it's very directed to you as the reader. So the blurb says in part, this remarkable novel leads you through many different books, including a detective adventure, a romance, a satire, an erotic story, a diary, and a quest. But the real hero of them all is you, the reader. So I'm gonna take advantage of the opportunity that I am in a literary fiction headspace, doesn't happen always, and start reading this. So please join me in the fan corner for the cover of this book, and we'll see if this is fun weird, boring weird, or jarring weird, or any mixture of the above. So I will check back in with you a bit later. Alright, I literally just finished If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, and I'm so excited to talk to you about this book. It is a classic that actually stands up to the hype. And coming from me, if you've watched other videos on this channel, you know I don't say that lightly. This book is so brilliant. It's really an exploration of reading, writing, the relationship between those two, what it means to tell and to consume stories, what books are as material objects, which is something that I'm really intrigued by, and how readers and writers are in conversation with one another. This is really an exploration of that relationship and also kind of an inquiry into what we get out of the process of reading. If what we do is we read for the sake of like the feeling of wonder and of inspiration that we get at the beginning of a story when our minds are opened up to this whole other world and cast of characters and possibilities that go beyond our own lived experience, or if we read for the satisfaction of knowledge and of progressing in stories and getting like the closure of an ending, or if we read to find ourselves or to lose ourselves. It's just such a thought-provoking book, and it's got a really unique structure, so I won't say much about it because I think it's best enjoyed just going straight into it. But I would say it's kind of in some ways a response to the Arabian Nights as kind of like that classic example of storytelling. There were moments when I got confused, there were moments when I kind of got lost. I would definitely recommend, if you can, to read this in one sitting or as close to that as possible, because it's definitely one of those books where when I put it down and I came back to it, it could be a bit jarring and a bit disorientating. But even when I got a little bit lost in the sauce, it's so beautifully written and uniquely written that the prose was still really enjoyable, and I found so much to underline. And because of its structure, if you do get a little bit lost, as long as you retain the general premise of the book, which becomes apparent relatively quickly, it's okay because it moves from one chapter to the next and you can move on. Like, you can leave the zone of confusion pretty quickly if you need to. And I just really, really enjoyed it, and I don't think I've read anything like this. So I would love to do a reread of this book. I think this would also be a great book to book club with someone because, again, it's very underlinable, but there's also like imagery in this that I didn't fully dissect as I was reading, but I could totally see myself wanting to discuss it more with somebody else. There's just so much to react to and to reflect on. So I highly recommend, if on a winter's night of traveler, if you're looking for a book about books, about readers, about writers, and about just the magic of storytelling, this is a good one for when you want a little bit of a challenge and want something to really dig into. I think you could get a lot out of this. And with that, we're gonna switch to something that is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. And I want to read a rom-com because the new season of Bridgerton is out and I really want to watch it. And I don't want to binge watch it too much because I have things I need to do this week. So to get myself to stay on the rom-com fun trend, but not be just sucked into the void of being online, I'm gonna reread Funny Story by Emily Henry. I read this book in one day when it came out, so this will be a reread for me, but that's something I want to do a little bit more intentionally, is reread books that I know I enjoy. And I think this one will be a good palate cleanser. If you don't know, the premise is that our main protagonists are Daphne and Miles, and Daphne and Miles become roommates after their respective significant others leave them both to go be with each other. So Daphne was originally engaged to Peter, and then Peter breaks up with her to go have a romance with Petra, who was Miles's girlfriend. And so then Daphne and Miles end up having to live together because of the fact that their relationships have just fallen apart, and then they build up a friendship and yada yada yada. The story goes from there. I thought that was a really original premise for this, and I remember that the way that it started just made me laugh out loud. So I'm quite excited for this. I think this will be a quick one. Yeah, as much of a tonal shift as we can possibly achieve. So I will check back in with you later, probably honestly once I've finished my reread.
You look at me like I'm crazy when I shut my feelings out. You look at me like I'm different, still you stay cause you feel something real. Get so lost in my moments, doesn't mean I don't need you.